Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this video about gamification in human resource management. I am Giacomo Marzi from University of Lincoln, together with Mario Silic from the University of St. Gallen, Andrea Caputo, Matthijs Bal, and Martin Hingley from University of Lincoln. We are glad to be here to present and discuss the result of our study about the effect of a gamified human resource management system on job satisfaction and engagement. In the first part of this video, we present the result of our empirical research published on Human Resource Management Journal. Then we discuss the application of gamification in human resource management environment, together with a debate about the opportunities and the drawbacks associated with the implementation of a gamified human resource management system in the company. Would you like to introduce yourself, Mario, Andrea, Matthijs, and Martin? So, Mario?
Yes, hello, my name is Mario. I'm a postdoctoral at University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, and my background is strongly rooted in the IT, and currently I'm working on the overall topic of the gamification in the context of human resource management, but more importantly, surrounding the MIS, management of information systems field. Yeah, so that's in short about me.
So, Andrea?
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea Caputo. I'm an associate professor of strategy and entrepreneurship at the University of Lincoln. It's very pleasant to be here today with you on this webinar. And my research mostly focuses on decision-making and the digital transformation aspects that happen on business models and organizations, workplaces, and workspaces.
Matthijs?
Hello, my name is Matthijs Bal. I'm a professor of responsible management at the University of Lincoln in the business school. I'm a co-author on this paper, particularly because of my background and interest in human resource management. I'm a psychologist by training, and my research focuses on a variety of topics within the field of HRM and work psychology.
And then the moderator of the meeting, Martin.
Oh, hello. I'm Martin Hingley, Professor of Marketing at University of Lincoln. I'm really excited to hear this presentation. And my background is in industrial marketing, particularly aspects of power and supply chains between business-to-business partners. So I'm interested to see how we might apply this gamification concept more widely in a B2B concept. So looking forward to it.
So thanks to all to be here. Finally, I am Giacomo Marzi, lecturer in strategy and enterprise at the University of Lincoln. My main research fields are innovation management, new product development, strategy, and videometrics. So this presentation is based on a paper that we recently published on Human Resource Management Journal with Mario Silic, me, Andrea Caputo, and Matthijs Bal. The paper is entitled "The Effect of a Gamified Human Resource Management System on Job Satisfaction and Engagement." You can find the link to this paper on the description of this video, together with the links to all the authors' profile. So what is then gamification? In few words, gamification is when we apply game design elements in a non-gaming context. Why we do this? We do this because we would like to stimulate a behavior. Imagine, for example, a gamified domestic energy saving system where you can compete with your neighbors about who is saving more. Similarly to domestic energy saving, we have healthcare. For example, we can create a game where you receive points or badges if you have a healthy behavior. For example, if you eat fruits and vegetables every day, you can collect a badge. The same is for education. For example, while you are studying, while you complete a specific activity, you can receive a badge that allows you to be recognized in the community. But now we are moving to the core of the problem. Why gamification in the workplace? We know that employee satisfaction and engagement is essential for the company to be successful. Traditionally, the companies used rewards, for example, as we know, monetary rewards or fringe benefits. However, we can create satisfaction and engagement using gamification and allowing the employee to be a part of the community, be recognized, and feel motivated. The discussion, the debate about gamification, both from the practitioner side and the scholar side, is growing fast. And it's becoming one crucial trend in human resource management. This is confirmed by the fact that large companies like Cisco, Deloitte, and IKEA implemented gamification in their human resource management system. And also, if you look at the researches that are published about gamification, you can see that in the last year, 2 years, we saw a strong growth in terms of research published about this topic. So, as you can see here, gamification in the workplace is possible through leaderboards, badges, personal profiles, and recognition badges. It's very similar to a social network where you can receive likes and comments from your friends and from other users. It's very similar to a game when you play, for example, Xbox, PlayStation, you receive a specific badge if you complete an achievement. Here in a human resource management system, you can earn recognition badges by managers. You are in a leaderboard where points are given on specific circumstances. You can show your badges. You can send badges to someone else, and you can receive badges from your colleague. Mario Silic, one of the authors of these studies, is among the creator of this system. Mario, would you like to add something else about gamification in human resource management system and also about this system?
Well, overall, what is really important to mention here is that behind the system is designed using some design principles, and this is really an important aspect. There are probably a number of studies that were done prior to this one, but this is one of the first ones, if I may put it like that, that advances some really practical parts of these design principles that you mentioned, like leaderboard, like badges, etc., that we are seeing in different companies, because I have also quite strong company background, and I worked with several companies on this, and the companies do use these badges, but there was so far no real connection between these company-based practices and the research insights, and this is what we have tried to tackle. So I try to replicate literally what is happening in the company in the real life, and put behind the research approach, which is much more needed in this scenario to be able to prove some of the hypotheses that were driving the study.
So thanks, Mario. So based on the Mario experience and his practitioner experience and our experience as a scholar, In our model, we expect 4 ways through which gamification impacts employees' perception on the use of the human resource management system. As you can see in the model, that is the model published on our study, gamification is beneficial when people enjoy it, okay, H1, feel recognized through it, so hypothesis 2, H2, that goes through reciprocal benefits and performance expectancy, H3A and 3B, when they find it useful, that is the hypothesis 4, and when they are motivated to use it, okay, that is the hypothesis 6. The combination of these elements result in an increased job satisfaction and engagement. So this is the idea behind our study. This is what we would like to test and what we tested. Of course, in the paper, you will have a description of the theory behind all of these factors in our model. So, what is our research approach? To test our hypothesis, we use a representative sample. In that case, a large US-based multinational company. The company has 2 human resource management systems, one with gamification, the other without gamification. Then what we did? We took 2 groups, one using the system with gamification, and one using the older human resource management system without gamification. We asked them to answer a survey after 3 months, after 9 months, and after 1 year. Then we had 2 groups, a treatment group using gamification with 270 participants, and a control group with 128 participants, not using the gamified human resource management system. Then what we did, we analyzed these 2 groups across the time to see the difference between the groups using the gamified human resource management system and the other group using the traditional system. The 2 groups were distributed across the world in US, UK, Australia, and United Arab Emirates. And we finally analyzed the data with PLS at the 3 point in time. As it's possible to see from the picture, our hypotheses from the model that we presented before are confirmed with good statistical power and with a clear effect on gamification and on job satisfaction and engagement. As you can see, enjoyment is strongly related with job satisfaction. Recognition and usefulness go through reciprocal benefit and performance expectancy to influence job satisfaction and engagement. Also, the effect of these 2 constructs is relevant. Finally, the effect of gamification on motivation on job engagement is relevant too. Here, of course, we briefly present the result. The description of our result is available with more detail in the full text of the article that is accessible by the link below in the description of the video. We now move to the practical contribution of this study. What is then the contribution of our study? How can we help managers? How can we help scholars? How can we help to advance the theory and the practice about gamification? For sure, we stress that gamification has a clear effect on job satisfaction and engagement. The result is clear. The model showed us that is clear. organization should adopt gamification as the additional or even the primary motivational tool for the employees. In fact, the positive effect induced by gamification are not declining over the time. Here, Andrea, would you like to add something to this? Also about reciprocal benefit, enjoyment, and the age-related issues with gamification?
Thank you, Giacomo. I think one of the most important aspects of this study that should be highlighted is its global nature. So the fact that we spread across almost the entire globe, going from Australia to the United States, passing to the Middle East, we were able to see how this behavior is actually generalized in multiple culture and in multiple environments, making it a real international or global study. The other thing that you mentioned that it's quite important as a contribution is its longitudinal nature. So the fact that we were able to observe the impact and the effects of gamification over a year of time on these employees allowed our study to be one of the first in actually proving how the effects of gamification are consistent over time and actually are somehow accrued. So we didn't see a declining impact on the effects, but instead we actually saw that after 12 months there was a higher impact and effects of gamification. So this is quite, I would say, a breakthrough finding of our study that would somehow counter the idea that when we're using gamification, it helps in absorbing in a task on the time. So I don't know, for those of who are listening who are gamers, when you play the PlayStation or any game, you have a sense of absorption in that moment, but obviously when you stop, it kind of goes away. Instead, gamification, when it's probably applied in the workplace, the effects can be carried day after day. So that's quite an important aspect. Another aspect is as you were saying, is the age-related. So there are questions obviously about the age of employees, because there may be people that are more prone to gaming and more familiar with digital environment. So there is a question of digital literacy and the digital divide in organization that needs to be addressed. And in our conversation, I often mention the dark side of gamification, because to what extent, what are the externalities that may happen, because many people may see gamification as a nudge, as somehow a way of designing an environment where we make people more productive, working more, they don't feel the fatigue. But what happens actually when they exit the workplace? What happens to their anxiety, to the competition level inside the organization, and how these differ, for example, between younger and older employees? There are still many questions that are still open that can be answered after seeing the contribution of our study. So I think we've done a big job and a big contribution into bringing gamification in the HRM literature, and somehow I feel that we opened the door for much more research to be done to investigate what comes forward.
So thank you, Andrea, for this interesting comment. Of course, this study has also some limitation, as Andrea briefly stressed. First, we focused on a single organization implementing a specific gamification system. So other organization and different communication system, we think that should be explored. Also, the participants are from the same organization. We saw on our research approach that we focus on one large multinational company. Future studies, for example, should include an additional dimension to gamification. For example, the cultural dimension. What is the role of culture in relation to how gamification could increase job engagement and motivation, how different culture could react to a gamified environment. These are questions that should be explored. Also, we saw that, as Andrea said, age and personality, for example, millennials and new generation could better react to gamification compared to older generation. The same is for different group dynamics. For example, does a gamified environment could generate not only a positive behavior, but too much competition, anxiety, and discomfort? So, Matthijs, what do you think about this?
Thank you, Giacomo, for your presentation so far. I think we can make a couple of observations on the basis of this study. First, from the HR perspective and from the psychological underpinning of the model, so to say. So first, why do organizations use gamification? Well, first of all, you want to initiate some positive behavioral change among the employees. That is why you would use gamification. After all, the implementation of gamification is a costly process. You have to design it. You have to pay for the perhaps an external company to implement it, or you do it yourself. But anyway, it's quite an investment in terms of money and energy to implement it in the company. So why would you do it? Now, first, of course, to initiate some positive behavioral change among the employees. From a psychological point of view, it's of course clear that you want to seduce people rather than to punish people to elicit the desired behaviors. And so gamification can play an important role there in terms of seducing people to show this behavior that is desired in the company but of course our study shows that indeed gamification may relate to higher satisfaction and engagement among employees, but still, and as alluded to previously by you two, Andrea and Giacomo, it is only one organization. It's a financial services organization, so you may expect that most employees are online or working with their laptop and smartphones as a core part of their job. So you have a direct access to gamification elements in your work, whereas of course in more manual work, it's another question of how would you do that. But so we have to be careful, first of all, with generalizing the positive relationships that we have found. But there's also something other that we can say, because what we have shown is that let's take, for instance, one example. The usefulness is a predictor of engagement. So when people perceive the gamification as useful, it is more likely to be related to higher engagement in the job. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody in this organization also perceived the gamification to be useful and thereby were more highly engaged. So we also have to think about, okay, who are these people who are not perceiving the gamification as something useful? And the same, of course, applies to the other independent variables. And what can we do about that? So clearly, of course, the relationship we've seen are that the more likely you, or the more useful you perceive gamification, the more likely you are to be engaged in your work. But what about those people who are not seeing gamification as something useful, something they enjoy, something that motivates them in their work? Are we leaving them out of the whole gamification, or are we trying to kind of seduce them also to make use of it? And one element there, one deeper level that we can think of in terms of gamification, and especially the psychological processes underpinning the idea of gamification, is of course the role of social connection. And I think that the idea of gamification as a way to make people connect easily with each other, especially nowadays with the crisis where everybody is working from home. There is of course a greater need and desire for people to connect with each other. Now, if gamification can play that role, it's of course an excellent way. The other way is, of course, that you could also see earlier in the examples of how this gamification looked like in this organization, is that recognition played an important role. And so to be recognized, not merely by your supervisor, but also by your peers, is something that we know as psychologists has an important role in terms of motivating people at work. So the idea of being recognized for what you do and who you are at work. But then at the other hand, and that is also mentioned by you previously, is the idea of competition. And so if you have leaderboards as part of the gamification of work, whereby people or employees within an organization are compared with each other in terms of, and ranked in terms of who are the best performing employees. We know from HR research, we know from psychological research that may also have detrimental effects for motivation, because then it doesn't matter what your performance is, or is it only of importance what your performance is in relation to the others? So is only relative performance the thing that matters? And so therefore the question of who gets on top of the leaderboard. And that is something that, of course, organizations and we as scholars as well have to take into account in further thinking about gamification at work. But so I will stop now, because otherwise I will take all the time.
So thank you, Matthijs. I think that what you said about the detrimental effect of gamification, the dark side of gamification, it would be one interesting point that we could discuss about this during the open panel here at the end of this presentation, because I also see that we have several comments about this topic. So I move now to the last part of the presentation, that is the most practical part of this, where we ask how to implement gamification in your organization. So this is something that managers probably could find very interesting. We know that there are just few things to have in mind. The first one is to communicate the usefulness of the gamified environment. We see that usefulness is essential to get the people engaged with the gamification environment. You can use such an environment to highlight success stories inside the organization and create a storytelling of who succeeds, why, and now it has been recognized. Of course, the employees, the users, need to use the gamified environment, because if nobody is using this, okay, the gamified environment is not useful for the company. We know also that the mechanism of gamification also requires that you offer a desirable and public recognition, okay, like what is happening with the social network. So the users should be proud to receive a public reward. They should want public recognition in the community. This should go hand by hand with the recognition of the contribution of everyone. So in a gamified environment, the role of the community is essential. Okay. We also recommend that managers and in particular the HR managers, periodically check the effect of gamification environment on job satisfaction and engagement to see if adjustments are needed to the system. For example, for doing this, they can use the survey that we proposed in our study. Finally, we suggest to gradually extend the gamification system to other functions of the organization. For example, to training and recruitment, as we saw that companies like Cisco, Deloitte, and IKEA already did. They already applied gamification not only internally, but, for example, to recruitment and training. Mario, would you like to add something to help manager to implement gamification in their organization?
Yes, in one or two sentences, actually, I think gamification overall is an amazing tool that the companies can use, but not to abuse of it. So basically, the end goal is not really, to bombard employees, if I may say so, with different gamification principles, approaches, but rather, or on the contrary, to use the gamification in a positive way to boost this motivation, because at the end of the day, the ultimate decision is on the employee itself, who will decide to adopt these principles or not. But actually, if done smartly, there's a huge potential behind gamifying various processes in HRM, but also in the overall organization. And what we are seeing today is that many organizations are on the good path into this, but some of them are, as I just said before, probably abusing or using it to the extreme, which is probably not the way to go. So there's still some important research to do to recognize, to find out, to discover what's the good way of using it and not abusing it. So yeah, that's the small comment I had.
So thank you, Mario. So I think now that is the time for the open panel discussion. I will give then the word to Martin to start the open panel discussion about the role of gamification for research and practice, answer to the comments and discuss about even the dark side of gamification. Thank you to all for to participate in this presentation.
Thank you, Giacomo, and panel members and authors of this paper. I found that really interesting, really fascinating on lots of levels, and could be applied in a lot of context. I've noticed that we've generated quite a lot of chat for people viewing this webinar, which is great. And don't worry, I'm going to come back to those comments in the chat in a moment and pose the comments to the panel. But first, I just wanted to just sum up from my perspective. One of the things that was coming across strongly for me was the issue of engagement and whether people are fully engaged. As was posed by Giacomo, there might be a likelihood that people will be more engaged, probably at the younger end of the age scale, and their experience is probably greater and more natural with respect to gamification. There may be less engagement from older workers, and you may risk some alienation. So in a moment, I wanted to pose a question as to how we address gamification and engagement amongst older workers. But certainly I got the impression that people, once they are engaged, they will be very happy to take part. The other question I wanted to pose in a moment is about fairness and perception of fairness. Because if people are, if there is for example, a reward given in this virtual sense, to certain workers and others feel alienated, or fairness is not across the board to people, that may turn people off. So I wanted to come to that. The other point I wanted to raise, and we'll come back to all of these, is how we apply this in new contexts. While I was listening to Giacomo's presentation, I was thinking about my experiences in business to business, and I've worked for quite a lot of companies who apply KPI systems to their suppliers. So they use almost a gamified approach to KPI by using traffic light systems, and I think it could be adapted in this way to KPI systems to make those more engaged. So that was one I wanted to come back to. But let's first start with this issue of engagement. Don't worry, I'll come back to the chat comments in a moment. But I just wanted to have a quick response from the panel about engagement and what we can do about engaging those probably older workers that might feel slightly alienated. Do we have a Matthijs? Would you like to respond to that one?
Yeah, happy to respond to this one, especially because it's very much about one of the areas that I've been researching for quite a few years, the aging workforce and so on. So on the one hand, we have to take into account that there is this thing which is called the survivor effect, which is basically the idea that if there are older workers in the organization, those are the ones who have survived. So the ones who are not engaged are often leaving the organization, either to work for other organizations or to become self-employed. So we have this perpetual problem as scholars that when we do research in organizations, that we only have a fraction of the total population of all the workers, so to say, because many of them are also self-employed and so on. On the one hand, I'm not so afraid that gamification is purely something that is only of interest to younger workers, because if we look at older people, they're just as hooked on their smartphones as younger people. So there is, I think, a possibility that older workers might be just as engaged in response to gamification as younger workers. One thing I've noticed is in a healthcare, in a different study I've done, but in a healthcare context, we saw the emergence of buddies. So we saw younger people to connect with older people in the organization, whereby older people help the younger people to socialize, to get to know the rules, etc., etc. So to introduce them to what it is to be working in this particular healthcare organization, and younger people help the older people to get them introduced into the digital world, so making a profile on LinkedIn and so on and so on. So there is a possibility that if you do it well, that gamification could actually be a way that you can connect younger to older people in the organization much better. But then at the same time, we also always have to ask ourselves the question, what does this old truly mean? So when I started my academic career on the notion of age in the workplace, so that was 15 years ago, people of 40 years and older were regarded as an older employee. Now, luckily, this has changed. Now I'm approaching 40 myself. That you're not older anymore at the age of 40. So this idea of who is the older worker is also a very relative one. There is no single understanding of who the older worker is. So in that sense, I think we should be also careful with stereotyping older workers. And at the same time, if we perceive gamification as something that can have positive effects in the workplace when implemented well, and so on, then that it could also be a force to connect people, younger and older.
Thank you, Matthijs. That's really interesting, and particularly your point about the fact that older people are equally connected with the virtual world and with IT and so forth. So it's less of an issue. But I do want to pick up a link comment in the chat. I'm just looking at a comment by Holly Band. I'll read it to you, panel. And Holly says, while I'm in favour of gamification, it'd be very interesting to look at the effects of gamification on pressure and anxiety. And it's interesting that Matthijs mentioned the difference between young and older people. There's quite a lot of well-publicised issues to do with anxiety, particularly amongst younger people. So we were talking about the negative effects on older people, but actually younger people might feel more pressured and more anxious by this as another level of things to deal with. I wonder, Matthijs, I'm sure could answer that. It would be interesting though to just bring in the view of the other panel members to see if they have a view. Andrea, what was your thought on whether this will create additional pressure and anxiety?
Well, it's funnily enough, this was one of the reflections that was triggered by attending one of the conferences where we presented the study before publishing it, because we haven't considered that much, because I was looking while we were discussing at our data, and it's interesting to see that we did not find any age difference in our result. So our sample, which was roughly 400 more than 2 groups of 400 employees, they had an average age of 39 years with a deviation of plus minus 10. So, we are quite in the middle, or as Matthijs was saying, probably approaching the older generation of employees, and we didn't find any difference between the younger and the older. So that's an interesting aspect. The part on anxiety, as I was saying, it came to us during the conferences because we did not actually look for it. So it came as a reflection, and I would really be interested to repeat the study or to do a similar study specifically targeting anxiety. And as you were correctly saying, I'm not sure whether it would impact mostly older employees, because as Matthijs was saying, the older employees in the company are mostly the more resilient. So they are, and studies show that the older you are and the more experienced you are in a workplace, you're also more confident in what you do. So you're more resilient and as a survivor, I would say, while the younger may be more subject to anxiety. And in here, we can look at the studies on normal gaming, where we can see that we're all advised, even children, to game a limited amount of hours per day and not to get involved too much because of the anxiety that carries on with you. So I think that would be a very big question mark for gamification, even considering the new reality that we are going to. So I'm doing some research on virtual teams, and obviously with COVID-19 and the surge in remote working, I think there may be also a new era or a new boost on gamification, because companies would be looking at ways of keeping the performance high despite this virtuality. So I really think that can have a severe impact on the younger employees rather than the older ones, honestly.
That's great, Andrea. As a follow-up to that, obviously engagement is the key issue here, and getting people engaging, getting people involved. Okay, there may be no age barrier to that, but let's think also. A thought I was having when you were making the presentation was the concept of fairness. When you try to engage employees in anything in the workplace, I was thinking, I've done some previous work on corporate social responsibility and how to engage employees in CSR projects within an organization. That may be charity giving and so forth. I got certainly from the research that I've done, people are much more likely to engage with something if it means something to them and their colleagues that they're close with. So they're more likely to give to CSR projects if it's meaningful to them. And I'm wondering, with the same concept here, how do you make something meaningful and how do you make something fair? And how do you communicate that with a level of engagement? I wonder if Giacomo or Mario had a thought on engagement to make it appear fair and make it appear meaningful to your employees. Giacomo, did you have a view?
would we like to answer together about this?
Yeah, Giacomo, if you have a view, did you have a view on fairness and how you communicate fairness through gamification? Because people will soon be turned off if if the system doesn't appear fair, if it appears to promote certain people within the organization, others will be soon turned off if it doesn't appear to be a fair system.
Yes, so the first point is I think that at least at the beginning, when you introduce a gamified environment, you should have a voluntary participation. You do not have to force employees to be a part of this gamification environment. The second point from my side is that we saw that if the people enjoy it, they would like to participate. So fairness in that case is not becoming anymore a problem, because if you enjoy to have a good competition, you do not feel it as unfair. This is the concept of eustress. When you induce on the people a positive level of stress and a positive level of competition. So the people enjoy to do it, enjoy to show their achievement. They could be happy to show their achievement, because we know all of us want to show the community to the community that we belong to our success. The point is we need to create a balanced environment where we do not create too much competition. And we know that in an organization we have different people working. For example, we have managers, we have administrators, we have a technician. All of them should have to share their success story. There is no a better success or a small success.
So your view really is that as long as there is enjoyment, it will create engagement, and fairness shouldn't be an issue.
Yes, and also, of course, we need the transparency of the gamified environment. Maybe I see that Matthijs would like to add something to this.
Matthijs, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thanks. We've mentioned a couple of times the idea of competition, and in relation to fairness is of course an important point. And as radical humanists or as radical thinkers, there's often the tendency to discredit competition because it sets up people against each other, and so basically to compete with each other, who is the best. And it can be, of course, linked to evolutionary thinking, where competition is but I think we should not discredit competition too much in the game in the context of gamification, but primarily not as a way of setting people up against each other. So not competition among people, but competition in terms of ideas and inputs. And that is, I think, where we need, just like in science and research, we are competing with each other, not as individuals, but we are competing on ideas. Okay, what is actually the most valid idea here, or what is the most valid hypothesis? And in the same context, gamification can be used as a way of, because there was also the question of Simone Pizzi in the chats about sustainable business models, and this is also where I think we can gamification has the potential to elicit a healthy competition on ideas, on what is now the best way forward as an organization. And in 2017 I published a book on dignity in the workplace, where two things were central. So the idea of dignity, but in relation with dialogue. And so this dialogue, the question then, which I have also received from readers once in a while is then, okay, but how does this dialogue take place? Now, gamification can be such a way to spur dialogue in the organization among employees about, okay, what is now the best business, the sustainable way forward for our business? What is, and so then we can create a competition on ideas using collaboration among employees. And this is a way also through which we can ensure fairness. And I think this is also an organizational point of view, and a lack of research on it is, of course, the idea of exclusion, because of course, gamification has always needs to be on the basis of voluntary participation, but it cannot be on the basis of exclusion. So if you're not taking part in the gamification, that you're automatically excluded. So also leading to exclusion from perks and promotion possibilities and so on.
Thank you, Matthijs.
Yeah.
That's great. I just because you mentioned the particular chat comment of Samani Pizzi, who was talking about whether I'll read his comment, in which way gamification could develop a more sustainable business model. So I wonder if some of the other panel members have a view on whether gamification will create a sustainable business model. Andrea, did you have a view on that?
Thank you, Martin. Yes, I would like to build upon what Matthijs was saying to reply to this. I think one of the key aspects that will emerge, and I think there is a need for us as a management scholar to portray this, is it will be a new managerial figure that somehow will be, I call it like the gamification architect or the gamification manager, because all that we discussed, it's also a matter of the architecture of how you design the system. You know, we talked about transparency, so the fact that the need to design a system that is transparent enough to engage people and ensure fairness, but at the same time without creating the negative results of excessive transparency, where you can have some sort of dictatorial or George Orwell 1984 controlling system on employees, where everybody feels compelled in participating and being active. So we need to balance that. And I think one of the ways to balance that with also the inclusion of a gamified environment that fosters sustainable behaviors and in turn sustainable business model will be the architect. So there must be, in my view, a managerial position that is responsible and accountable for the gamification project and how the system is managed, and that architect can be the leader in portraying the sustainability, I would say, behaviors that can reinforce, in that case, sustainable business models, especially if we look at, for example, third sector or the service sector, when we have employees dealing with people and with several, like emotional, I would say, like all the emotional labor that it's done virtually. I think in that case, a gamified environment that is transparent enough and it's designed for sustainable behaviors can really help. And I don't know if our colleague Mario, who was actually one of the designer of the system, agrees with my view of having a managerial figure that somehow manages the architecture of the system. Mario, what do you think?
Yeah, actually, these are good points. And yes, I was the only designer of the system. What I literally did, I replicated, because I was working for over 15, 18 years in a company which implemented basically a couple of systems. And I did see the evolution from non-gamified system to fully gamified system. And actually, I got inspired very much by all these design elements behind. Now, the one of the key points that Martin highlighted relates to this fairness, and especially because here we are talking about an international company, right, which has offices in several countries, and the fairness is a critical aspect here. And why is that? Obviously, if you are an employee, so from the employee standpoint, it's not the same as if you are physically working in a place like Vilnius, Lithuania, where the company has 3,000 employees, and if you're in a small office in Turkey where the company has 10 employees, right? So this part of the fairness plays a huge difference, because to give you just one aspect of the gamification, if you are using an element like a thank you card or feedback element or whatsoever, obviously if you're surrounded by 100 people, your colleagues, it makes a huge difference if they see your name and everybody will say hello, thank you. So this aspect is really one of the critical one that cannot be seen in a smaller offices, because not only no one really cares because you're only 10 of you, so you don't have that visibility outside of your small office, but also this fairness comes into really an important aspect. Unless someone else recognizes you outside of this your small office box, it might be quite challenging actually. And this is one aspect that I guess companies will have to sort out, how to be more fair. And I have to be honest, because I'm still somehow kept a lot of contacts in all of these companies. This fairness might kill the gamification in certain aspects, because if I as an employee don't see the value anymore, no one is recognizing me. They did it 2 times, 3 times, but then I got the visibility. People changed, departments changed, your reporting lines changed, your visibility got lost, right? So this is a kind of vicious circle that gamification will have somehow to resolve. I'm not really sure how, but this is one of the key dangers if a company is pursuing this gamified direction. So yeah, Martin raised an excellent point. I think future research should really focus on this one. I'm not sure at this point how, from a design perspective, you could tackle this easily.
That's really helpful, Mario. I'm just going to refer to the chat again, because and good that you responded to that issue on fairness. And I've got another comment relating to this fairness issue in the chat, and I'll read it to you. This is from Holly Band again, and it says, I'll quote it. So, if a company sets a structure to follow, i.e. they lay out terms in advance regarding what they expect in order for public awards and recognition to be given, would that improve engagement? That way employees would have grounds to challenge if they feel something has been unfair. So Holly's suggesting is that fairness is more transparent if the organisation sets out the terms in advance and it's clearly communicated. So I think that would help alleviate issues over criticism of fairness if the organisation is on the case and transparent about it. The other issue, I think, Mario, that you raised is size of organisation. And I wanted to just mention that because it's somewhere in the chat, I can't remember who said it. Someone said about size of organisation. Does it matter how big an organisation is? Mario's just made a comment on that. It's all very well when you have a large multinational organisation with lots of resources, but can this be implemented in SMEs? I wonder if the other panel members have a view of the application according to size of organisation. Giacomo, did you have a view whether this is applicable to smaller organisations?
So regarding this MES, the point is, of course, implementing a gamification environment requires not a huge, but a substantial investment in terms of the infrastructure behind, coding, the coding of the software engineers behind, but also training server where the gamification environment will run. I think that the opportunity for SMEs to use gamification is to move all the communication of the company, or at least the majority of the company, the training, to move the recruitment, all the business processes in the gamified environment. In that way, okay, they spend a lot of resources in terms of money and time in developing a gamified environment, but at least they have one only environment, one only system that allows them to the employees to communicate, to get the training, to feel motivated, also probably to be in contact with customers and suppliers. So the chance for SMEs to use gamification internally is to use gamification at 360 degrees for the organization in order to reduce the cost of the investment. That Mario, I imagine, can confirm that it is quite relevant.
Thank you. Andrea, I wonder, because this is your area, you've worked on SMEs.
Yeah.
Would you add anything further to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Giacomo said is absolutely correct. I would add that the fact that we can actually apply the benefits of digitalization trends. So SMEs, they can actually now have access to a number of provider of ready solutions that can substantially reduce the investment needed. So in our case, and in what Mario did was obviously for a larger corporation. So there was an ad hoc design of the system, which obviously is quite costly to do so, and probably unfeasible for an SME. However, there are several solutions that integrate mobile solution apps that can be applied by SMEs, and the benefits can be incredibly high compared to the reduction in costs. So there is definitely an opportunity there, and I would say that many providers, and there is an opportunity again for providers to actually start new business models, they can integrate experts. What we demonstrated with the studies, that if you integrate experts in HRM, expert in psychology, and in fairness in the workplaces, like in the comments that some of the audience was pointing to us, with the designers, then you can actually have what I was mentioning as the architect, which is, it could be a function made by more than one person, but then you will need to have the expertise and skills of people from organizational psychology, from human resources, and computer design. Then you can actually have solutions that are fair, that they ensure that there is engagement. They are also cost effective for SMEs, and properly, I would say, designed and managed. So I think that this is definitely an opportunity, and I can tell you that there are several SMEs that are using gamification mostly in marketing to engage loyalty, like all these games that as customers we can do. And there is not a big difference in translating that into the workplace. So I really hope to see more SMEs into integrating gamification in their systems.
That's great. Thank you very much. On another subject, the one I raised right at the beginning, I suggested that I had my own personal experience with KPIs, and I work for a very large multinational organization that have had a very simplistic but effective KPI system, a traffic light system, a red, amber, green traffic light system, in which they set performance targets internally with their own employees, but also externally with contractors and suppliers. And even as advisors and as an academic advisor to this multinational organization, I was set KPIs. So I just wonder whether you think, and Giacomo, I think, wanted to come in with this, whether you think it's applicable in the wider business-to-business environment. Obviously, we talked about inside an organization, but whether we could gamify KPIs and talk about wider sets of relationships internal to the organization and external with respect to KPI setting outside an organization. Giacomo, I think you wanted to come in to respond to that.
Yes. So, for example, in this study, we use job satisfaction and engagement because we can easily measure it with a survey, and of course, they ultimately shows the satisfaction and engagement of the employees. But for example, you can use not self-reported KPIs. For example, you can use as a KPI to see if the gamified environment is working. For example, the sick leave. If you see a reduction in terms of sick leave of your employees after you introduced a gamified environment, of course, you can say that the gamified environment worked very well. Another approach is to measure the turnover. Of course, leave and turnover could be influenced by external factor. Imagine, for example, sick leave in this situation of COVID-19. Of course, it increased, but in a normal situation where you do not have unpredictable external factor, sick leave or turnover of the personnel could be a good and a very useful KPI for the managers. Also, regarding business to business, we know that there is a huge debate about collaboration with suppliers, open innovation, that is a form of collaboration. Using a unified environment that in a certain way is a social network, so a communication tool, you can increase the collaboration between the employees of the customer and the employees of the supplier. If you match these, you can, for example, foster the communication between the teams. For example, I'm working in new product development. One huge problem of new product development is the cross-functional integration. How you can integrate and let, for example, marketing team, external supplier, R&D department to communicate better for a better new product development performance project. Gamification could be applied even to this. You can create a safe space where the people work all together, but not only a place to work, but a place also to enjoy, to share badges, to create a small competition between small teams. So in that case, you can extend gamification to core business processes. Probably Mario, maybe he could have some idea of application beyond beyond the human resource management. What do you think, Mario?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, and I'll give you just one context which is highly relevant. And I just published a paper in one of the top journals, and it relates to the cybersecurity and the gamification. And what's the whole idea behind? We all know that employees in companies basically quite often they don't care about the policies, procedures, etc., etc. And also, in particular, when it comes to the training, in every single company I work for, what the employees are most of the time doing, not all of them, but many of them are just simply blindly clicking next to any trainings that they're getting. So by gamifying these practices, not only because at the end of the day, you can't force an employee to do something that he or she doesn't want to do. So the only way is really to motivate someone to do it, either financially, which is really difficult one for the companies, or really to provide these other types of the motivation by doing some leaderboard, by giving some points, which ultimately, and to give you a practical example, in a company where I worked for, the objective is you collect the points and then you can buy some nice presents, some nice things for yourself. So this kind of the motivation really works, and people, not all of them, but quite a lot of them get much more motivated. So what I did, I created very similar platform and applied it to the cybersecurity training context, and in particular to malware context. You know, when you click on these malicious links on the website that you're getting in email or just by surfing, and it proved that it really works. So people really get much more motivated when there's something for them at the end of the game, because it's a game at the end of the day, right? So you know, this is just one concrete example of where gamification really plays an important role in motivating someone's behavior Without that, it's we are all of us and employees especially bombarded by the behaviors we should follow, and the only trigger that will do the difference could be the motivation, could be by gamifying some of our behaviors, right? So yeah, in this context, it's pretty much extendable, and this is one of the areas I'm still researching. How the culture, as you Giacomo pointed out in the beginning, how culture can play what kind of the role culture can do, despite the fact that you are gamifying some of these processes, how culture or other aspects, what kind of role they might have in this context. Yeah.
Thank you, Mario. Now, I'm becoming a bit conscious that, believe it or not, we have been talking for 1 hour and 9 minutes. Can you believe that, panel, that we've been here? But Mario just raised several other things that we could go on to talk about. However, I am conscious that I think it's best that we keep to time. And I want to end on one comment from the chat and have a quick response of each of the panel members. And I think we'll wrap it up there. So I'm going to pose you the comment from the chat by Mohammed Fakar Manesh. And his question was, I'm just wondering what could be considered as the pitfalls of implementing gamification paradigms. So we talked about lots of positives, a quick run around the panel to say what we think the negatives or the pitfalls are, as brief as you can, and I think we'll therefore wrap it up. Matthijs, just a summary of what you think maybe the negatives are.
Well, I think if you implement it in a poor way as an organization, it sets up a competition among the employees, whereby you create exclusion of those who are not popular or are not skilled in networking, or who are not part of the old boys network, and so on. So this may only strengthen existing inequalities within organizations. So this is, I think, one of the important potential pitfalls.
Andrea?
Well, I think to add on that, to build on that, is that one of the main pitfalls could be the idea of applying a blanket solution to gamification. So the idea that what worked for one organization will work for every other organization, and the idea that like Mario said, it's very different to be in an office of 10 people versus 3,000. So the idea of having KPIs that are standard across the organization, those ideas are very, I would say, ingrained into managers' head, because it's much easier to create a KPI that is good for everyone. But they mostly actually foster behavior that is counterproductive, and they may end in actually harming the growth and then the welfare of not only the employees, but also in turn of the organization. So I would be extremely careful, and I would be definitely strongly advising everyone who wants to implement gamification to actually tailor the intervention to the specific context and the needs of the organization.
Thank you, Andrea. Mario, did you have any further comments to make on any negative connotations?
Is to get bored. Basically, simply said, people will get bored of the gamification, of the nice features after a while. So if the company cannot come up with something different, interesting, something what's in it for me. Actually, I got bored of this gamification when I was in a company after a while, because you can see that more or less always the same people get awarded. So, and this is mainly because of this fairness topic you raised. So, companies, organizations will have to come up with some more fair approaches, how to stimulate, motivate, and do it a bit differently. I think it's on the good way, more or less, in many companies. This is how I.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And people get tired of the same old thing. I like to see progression. Absolutely right. Well, Giacomo, this was your started with your presentation, so I guess we should finish with you and wrap up our panel discussion with you. Okay, we don't want to finish on the negative note. So maybe let's just say a quick word about any possible negatives that other panels members have not mentioned. But then I'd like you to wrap up by saying why gamification is important for the future.
So connecting to with what Mario said is, I think that also gamification should be something that you do not create. You shouldn't have to create the gamified environment and then leave it as it is, because as Mario said, all the same people get rewarded. So the company changes, the people inside the company changes. So you have to constantly update the gamified environment to get the change in the company, in the environment, in the employee, to stimulate the fairness. So there is the need to have someone, an administrator, a moderator that could manage the gamified environment to keep it updated with what the company is doing right now. For the future, what the literature and the practice is telling us is that gamification is now be extending wider, not only to job engagement and satisfaction, to each human resource management system, but also to training, education, some behavior. So probably what we will see in the next future, it will be that even in our private life, some of these gamified approaches will be used, because with the increased digitalization, imagine you can now turn on a light. It's easy to attach to an app a gamified environment where it will help you to, for example, reduce the consumption of energy, to switch on the lights, have a community of people, and so on. So I think that a lot of things will happen in the near future about this topic.
Okay, panel, are you happy to wrap it up there? We've been talking for nearly an hour and 17 minutes, so hopefully this has engaged people to respond, and it's given you as a panel to take the next step with your paper, actually, because it's raised some new issues that can be taken up by you as researchers, or by other researchers, to pick up on your ideas from your excellent paper. And thank you also to the contributors who have signed into the chat. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Giacomo again just to wrap up and finish.
So simply, I would like to thank you all the participants of this member. I would like to thank you, the marketing team of the university, who helped us and make this possible, and of course the Lincoln International Business School to giving us this space to discuss and hopefully give something useful for students, managers, scholars. And in the description of this video, we included all of the links to our profiles. So if you would like to contact us to discuss about this topic, we will be more than happy to answer to your question.
Thank you.
So I think that this webinar could be ended. Thank you for who followed this, and see you for next episode soon. Bye, and have a good day, and bye.
Thank you.
To all.
Bye all.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.